Welcome to Happy Talks with Dr. Alice and Donovan. Dr. Alice Fong is a holistic naturopathic doctor and founder of Amour de Soi Wellness, and Donovon Jenson is a software engineer and founder of HowToHappy.com. Together, they're out to cause more happiness in the world.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Happy Talks. My name is Dr. Alice, and this is my awesome co-host, Donovan. And today we are talking about having mental breakdowns. So Donovan, what are your initial thoughts when it comes to mental breakdowns?
Yeah, so for me, I think the word could probably applied to a couple different situations that vary greatly in terms of scope and like how long they last, right? So, for example, one instance of sort of like a mental breakdown, or at least what I would think of is like you're feeling like really, really overwhelmed to the point where like you just like break down crying or like I don't know, get like irritable, like crazy irritable and start like breaking stuff, like some sort of a point where like there's so much stress and pressure and whatever else that you just have like full emotion dominating everything in your mind. That's one version I would think of.
Yeah.
I think another version would probably be something closer to like a psychotic break from reality, like a breakdown, like where either you're just like not able to sort of function correctly, or you're like seeing things that aren't there, or like just having some sort of like break with reality. Um, those are like the two sort of buckets that I would think of when I think of mental breakdown. But I'd be curious if you have something different or what other thoughts you have to add.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good way to define it, I think, because I was thinking that there are variations, and the the initial one that you described seems like something that I've experienced personally, at various times, not frequently, but once in a while when I just feel stressed and overwhelmed with life. I probably just had one like a week ago. Just overwhelmed from working and being pregnant and uncomfortable, and then dealing with dog situation stuff and life situation, and then being annoyed at my husband. So it just was like, it's just too much, and I cried. um but having a psychotic break, which is kind of like, I think of a mental breakdown when you see portrayed in like TV or media. Actually, I just over the weekend watched Queen Charlotte, which is kind of, it's not really a documentary about their life. It's more a fictionalized world with, historical influences. And Queen Charlotte and King George III. King George III actually had mental illness, and I guess what you would call like those psychotic breaks of reality, where he was just kind of experiencing life in a whole different world, compared to my mental break was still grounded in reality and life and just feeling overwhelmed.
Yeah, I think that, that first bucket and sort of the experience that you've had is probably the one that most people would be familiar with or have experienced at some point in their life, of just being like so overwhelmed that your emotions take over and you're not really like thinking rationally. You just need like to go into the mode of processing that.
Yeah.
I would think that like breaks from reality are far less common. Um, it is something that I have experienced though for a brief period of time, like when my anxiety was at its worst and I started on Zoloft.
Oh.
There was a couple days where like I wouldn't say that I had the flavor that was where I couldn't, like I was hallucinating things, right? But the way that my brain was working like was really frustrating and kind of scary. Like disjointed from reality in a way that I haven't really experienced before. And it was so hard for me to like process things or think about things clearly or correctly. And like I still had enough presence of mind to like recognize that I wasn't able to think correctly. But it was weird. It was a trip. It was like a completely categorically different type of experience. And I imagine at a relatively minor scale compared to what is possible just from, things that you either have seen portrayed or like see, like a lot of the homeless population has schizophrenic breaks of like
Right.
that sort. And I guess what stood out to me from my minor experience and then just what I've seen moving forward from then is like it doesn't feel like in the moment there's really anything that you can do to get your brain working back on track. And I imagine if it's like a full psychotic break with like hallucinations, then whatever experience the person is having is like genuinely what they think is going on, which is just interesting to me to say the least, but also kind of sad.
Yeah, definitely. Although I think, I think there could be a relationship, not like the only cause of more psychotic mental breakdowns as possibly drug use, I would imagine. So I imagine if someone were to kind of work at getting sober, potentially that could reduce the number of episodes.
Yeah, without looking it up off the top of my head, I think if you have some sort of a predisposition to schizophrenia or like things in that category and have either heavy drug use or like heavy trauma and stress, like those are the sorts of things that can
Definitely.
trigger episodes and trigger them more often. And I imagine something like homelessness is like the absolute maximum of all the risk factors that you could possibly put together to have a psychotic break.
Yeah.
So I'm sure if you have any predisposition to that whatsoever, getting into that situation,
Yeah.
will get you in a bad place pretty fast.
Yeah, definitely. But, speaking of the more common type, the one I think much more people have experienced, what would you say would be kind of a good way to prevent or reduce that from happening?
Yeah, so from my experience, most of the time, once you get to that point, you've sort of already missed the boat in terms of like a lot of the things that you can do. Like once you hit that point of a breakdown,
Right.
a lot of the times it's like you just have to take a step back and just be sad or angry or whatever it is and just like let that run its course. Leading up to it though, I think it's sort of some of the same things I've used to manage like anxiety, which is just like stepping back, taking breaks. Um, Sometimes it'll be around like getting support to help figure out what's most important because sometimes I can find myself stuck in like, well, I have to do this and this and this, and I have to do this and this is going to happen. And oh no, this went wrong and this went wrong and this other thing went wrong and now I have all these things to do. But if with a second pair of eyes, like if I start getting too wrapped up, a lot of times someone else can be like, okay, like yeah, someone ran into your car, but like you don't have to get that dent fixed right now. Like it's not nothing's gonna happen if that's not fixed. Whereas like if I have 500 things going on and 15 going wrong, then like that might be the thing that like pushes me over the edge and just like, oh god, like I can't keep up with this. So that's one thing that has helped me a lot. And then another one is if I can get enough space to recognize like what's a good way of putting this, the impact that it's going to have on my life whether or not I get something done, right? Because a lot of times again when I get overwhelmed to that point, it's two things that matter and 10 things that like are just extra noise. And once I can realize like, okay, I have to take care of those two things because they're important,
Right.
that can help me free up a lot more space to like breathe and whatnot. But I'd be curious what your experience is, what works for you.
Yeah, I feel like it's definitely less common nowadays because I can kind of gauge where my emotions are at more accurately, I believe. And I can kind of sense when it's like when I'm starting to get stressed or overwhelmed, then I kind of, if I'm able to, try to purposely take a step back and breathe and take a break and kind of take care of my own mental health before taking on anything else. But there's sometimes situations like the one this past week where it just was like a really like kind of dog sitting dogs that were like getting me up at 6 a.m. and so just reduce sleep and then having to go work, like drive an hour and a half to work a long and busy day while pregnant. And so I'm like sweating and uncomfortable and just kind of getting through that, and then having to drive like 2 hours home. And it was just like, and then kind of getting in a little tiff with my husband over stupid things. It was just kind of like the accumulation of all of that. It's like I couldn't have really avoid, because like with work, it's I have scheduled appointments. I can't necessarily like be like, nope, I don't want to see you today. Bye. As when there are people that, you know, if it's just involving me working on like something where I can like, oh, I can do this at an alternate time, or when I'm feeling better, I can do it on my own schedule, versus when it involves someone else, it makes it a little harder. And so like by the end of the day, I was just really worn out and tired and overwhelmed, and just like um just the littlest things just kind of pushed me over the edge and ended up having me like cry on the drive home, because I was just not feeling that great. But you know, I think I gave myself permission to feel my feelings, and then decided to, you know, just really take it easy um for the rest of the evening and not address the heavier things kind of weighing on me until like the next day. I was like, you know, the conflict that I got in with my husband, I was like, you know, we are going to talk about it, but I just can't do it tonight. I just can't deal with this right now. I need a break from life, and we'll talk about it in the morning, kind of a thing. And so you know, you do the best that you can with the circumstances that you have. And sometimes that doesn't always prevent it, but you can, even if you reach that breaking point of just like, you know, letting it all out, sometimes it's kind of, I think, maybe necessary in some instances. And then how you move past it, it's like, okay, you've gotten to the breaking point. Now what? Like, how do you deal with it? And maybe it's like just take a step back from life and just focus on relaxation and enjoyment, and that's kind of what I did to kind of get back on track, and I felt a lot better the next day.
Yeah, I think you touched on quite a few important things that I just want to kind of highlight.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that I know is true for myself that you kind of said as you were laying out your story is if I get tired, or as I get more tired,
Mm-hmm.
the chance that I'm going to have a breakdown of that sort
Yeah.
increases exponentially.
Yeah.
Like sometimes one of the biggest pieces is just like to take a minute to rest,
Mm-hmm.
to recharge and start over. Like I
Mm-hmm.
can't tell you the number of times I've been so frustrated with stuff that I'm like about to break something. I go take a nap, wake up, and I'm like, I can get all this stuff done in like a couple hours. Like
Right.
what is happening?
Mm-hmm.
So not always, but like
Mm-hmm.
being tired is a huge factor, and sometimes that thing needs to shift. Another thing that you mentioned that I think is important is just like you said, like recognizing when you can sort of push off tasks till later, right? Like you said, and just focus on relaxing. Like a lot of times that can give you enough space to again just get sort of the reset you need to come back with like clear priorities, a fresh mind. Like I feel like that's been a consistent experience for me when having these sorts of breakdowns. Is just getting like sort of tunnel vision
Mm-hmm.
into like I have to do this and I have to do this and this sucked and this happened and this also sucked, and like
Mm-hmm.
anything to like make more of that space has been a lot more useful. A follow-up question I had for you
Yeah.
was when you have these sorts of times, like what do you do, or what do you feel like has helped you for them to not last as long, right? Because there's one
Mm-hmm.
part of like getting to the point you're having a breakdown at all, and then there's a difference between like it was 20 minutes, I just cried, and then I composed myself and started, or like this lasted for months and I was just done with everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I haven't had a situation where it's, well, I don't know. I was like, have I had a mental breakdown that last month? I mean, then I thought about that time when I broke up with my college boyfriend, and that was like in my early 20s, and I didn't know how to deal with my emotions and was like pretending like life was perfectly fine. And I went to work and nobody could tell that anything was wrong with me. And then I would cry myself to sleep every night. It was how I dealt with it for months. um, but I don't know if I would define that as a mental breakdown, as just kind of not having the skills to manage my emotions or express my emotions, to move and process them in a healthier way. Not that it was a bad way to do it. It was just kind of the skills that I had at the time. But as far as where it kind of depends on the situation, I guess. And I like, for me, usually conflicts with a partner definitely creates an added layer of stress in my life, when especially if there's a lot going on. So if I'm able to kind of like, I'm typically the type of person who will want to address the conflict right away and move past it, so we can just not go to bed angry and just be like fine, like get it done and over with kind of a personality. And so it was actually kind of different for me to not want to do that for once and actually be like, actually no, because I know it will be good to get to the other side of that conflict, but I know in getting to the other side might create more stress and tension. And I just know I cannot handle that right now. I'm not in a mental space to handle that. So I'm just going to put a pause where we are going to address it. And I communicated that, but we're going to wait until I'm like in a little more rested, not as tired or exhausted and overwhelmed from life. And then we can kind of address it at that time. And I think kind of making that assessment or judgment call of like, would it be better to address it immediately? And also assessing where your partner's at. Cause like, I think he's more likely to like, I need some space. Cause I'm like the one who typically is like, let's figure this out right away, work through it. And I get that's not everyone's style or what they need or how they need that space. And so I think it comes down to communication a lot of times, if that's one of the sources of stress or overwhelm for you, being able to communicate effectively. And because we've had so many conflicts, like I had faith and trust that we would be able to work through it because we've worked on our communication over the 5 years we've been together. So I didn't think that would be a problem. It's just like a matter of when would we deal with it, kind of a thing. But then it's just also, yeah, I think if it's outside of like a conflict of with another person, then it might be just like, okay, where can I build in breaks into my life? And usually they come in waves. It's like, thankfully I had the next day off. So I could rest and kind of recover. And then like today I wasn't feeling that great, so I took a nap. Naps are very healing sometimes. And so I think it does come down to, purposely, intentionally giving yourself a break from life.
Yeah, I'm gonna lay something out, and I'll be curious how it
Yeah.
lands for you after I'm done. But basically, I feel like over time,
Mhm.
as I've gotten older, I've gotten better at sort of like you were saying, seeing when I need space and breaks and
Mhm.
how to structure my life more and more so that it's less likely that I'm going to get
Mhm.
overwhelmed in this sort of way. So like for like the example you just gave, like in
Yeah.
relationships, like I have developed better tools
Mhm.
so that things are far less likely to escalate so
Mhm.
that I'm not as often going to be in like an emotionally charged position with my partner. Same
Yeah.
thing with like finances, right? Like over time I've gotten more and more in tune with like, okay, what do I need to spend money on, how much is coming in, et cetera, et cetera. Like what can I do to be more comfortable there? And like across all the different stressors in my life, I feel like more and more I'm able to sort of like bucket those things or like compose my environment in a way that I'm less likely to get overwhelmed.
Mhm.
And really the only time that I feel like overwhelmed in that way, like to having a breakdown, is if a couple things go wrong and I'm pushing myself in something new, like,
Mm.
buying this house and trying to get the hire contractors to finish the basement, and like all that stuff is new to me. If that happened, plus uh a little bit of a fight started, plus like I don't know, somebody hit my car. Like
Mm.
nowadays it takes a lot more things to go wrong
Right.
that are out of my control, because I feel like I've spent a lot more time cultivating the things that are in my control to
Right.
keep things more balanced. So I would just be curious how that lands for you and what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I think I've had a similar experience in that I've cultivated a life in certain areas where it's like I manage what I can within my control, but the other part of that is that life does happen, and there's a lot of things in life that are out of your control. And sometimes shitty things happen, and sometimes they happen in short succession of each other, and that just really sucks when it does happen, and it could be one thing after another, and it feels definitely overwhelming. But I think in those moments, what I tend to do is kind of take a step back for a moment and realize that, this isn't the end of the world typically. I mean, I've gone through many challenges in life and I've managed to get through it. And this is, something that we're gonna bounce back from eventually. And, sometimes these types of challenges are a good life lesson in some respect. And maybe we can't quite see it right now, but maybe later on, maybe we will. But yeah, just kind of not dwelling too much on the things that are out of my control and focusing on, like, accepting that, life is going to throw you curveballs and challenges at times, and that's okay. And having trust that life will work out and that we'll get through it. I think that trust in life is that I will trust in myself and trust that life will be okay at some point again, is kind of what helps me through those moments.
Yeah, I feel sort of the same way, and I'd be curious too if this lands for you. But I feel
Mhm.
like as I've had more experiences, I'm
Yeah.
able to get more trust, because
Mhm.
things like each individual challenge doesn't necessarily seem as scary as it did the
Mhm.
first time ever, right? Like kind of when you're talking about relationships from the past, like
Mhm.
I just remember having minor fights from my early relationships and thinking like, "Oh no, this is like the end of the world. This is the worst thing ever. I
Yeah.
need to do everything I can to work on this." Whereas now it's like, "Oh, one of us is kind of annoyed. That'll probably go away in like 30 minutes. Like, yeah, we should probably talk about it. Yeah, like
Mhm.
or whatever else." But sometimes it's just like, "Oh, this is just like a small wave, like just a small ripple." And
Yeah.
instead of actually doing things significantly different, it's more about like thinking about the stressor a little different, or just like realizing sort of like,
Mhm.
oh, like I don't know, this bill is due. Like, okay, this bill is always due. Like, I know that this is coming.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's just a matter of kind of allowing it to be being okay with these moments, and that yeah, it'll work out. Yeah, yeah. And then it's okay to have like those moments, those ripples and points in life that suck, because it makes you appreciate the not so sucky moments and the good moments and the happy moments and joyful moments. Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like as you uh get your mindset around that, or at least as you're able to better some of those problems, then
Yeah.
the chance of being overwhelmed to the point.
Hmm. Definitely. But I mean, I think we've covered the more common type of mental breakdown. I'm not sure. I mean, just a disclaimer to our listeners out there that we are not experts in like schizophrenia or those psychotic breaks. So it's just more that we're sharing our opinions on things, and this is not to be taken as expert advice or anything. But I am curious on like uh, what is your opinion about the more severe psychotic type of mental breakdowns?
Yeah, kind of like you said, I'm not super knowledgeable on it. It looks like an unpleasant place to
Yeah,
be
it doesn't
just
look
because
fun.
things seem really hard.
Yeah.
Uh, but other than that, I do know, I mean, to some degree at least, that partially it's like genetic and something that you
Mhm.
cannot control,
Right.
and partially there are for some people some environmental factors around just like stressors and other things like that. So, um, at the risk of still overstepping my knowledge, I
Mhm.
think just like trying to live like, a generic healthy life of just like supportive relationships and like sleeping and like not doing a bunch of the heavy mind altering substances and
Yeah, that
like
probably would
having a
help.
healthy diet and stuff like that. Like I think those things can help some people to a degree, but again, like not an expert by any means.
Yeah. No, that's kind of where along the lines of where I was thinking, and that I think having some structure and routine in your life is probably going to help. It might not cure the issue completely, but it potentially could reduce the number of episodes as long as like um yeah, structure and routine for anyone in life, whether they have mental illness or not, is always going to be beneficial for most people and could reduce those mental breakdowns, because it's like I think, it's almost to an extreme level. Like, yeah, if there's structure and routine in anyone's life, that gives your life more predictability. And so there's not so many new or unusual things. Not to say that this is an accurate portrayal of a psychotic break, but when I was watching Queen Charlotte, it's like the things that kind of set off his mental breakdowns in the show was just like, oh, new information. Finding out that he was going to be a father was something that is new and stressful, but he was actually doing better when he had more structure and routine in his life. um so I mean, yeah, this is, again, I'm not the expert in psychotic breaks or anything, but I think that would just be a general principle that would be useful for anyone in life.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those things that needs medical attention from a
Mhm.
specialist with a care plan for the
Yeah.
individual because
Mhm.
while we can say a few generic things that are useful for the vast majority of people, like the individual specifics of each case for this sort of condition is going to matter a lot. And I don't know. See, like, I don't even know enough to know how often or how effective medication tends to be, like any of that stuff. So it's definitely something that you got to be in touch with someone who specializes in this for to get
Yeah.
useful advice.
Yeah, definitely. Any other thoughts around this topic that you wanted to cover?
I think I got it all out there.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in this week. We appreciate you. And if you appreciate us, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and help spread the happiness in the world. We'll see you next time. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like it and then go and subscribe to my channel and ring the bell so you get notified when the next video comes out. If you check out in the description below, go to my website where you can get my free fast and easy guide to stress relief. Thanks again for checking us out, and we'll see you next time.